The call came on December 30th, and I'll never forget the chill in my mother's voice. Brenton, don't come tomorrow night. You'll make everyone uncomfortable with your situation. 28 years old, and my own family was disinviting me from our annual New Year's Eve celebration at the estate. As the youngest son of the Hartwell family owners of a luxury hotel chain across the Midwest, I'd always been the outsider. Sitting alone in my Chicago apartment that night watching distant fireworks through my window, I had no idea that in 12 hours, everything would explode. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake at 11:01 on New Year's Day. My head pounded from the cheap whiskey I'd drowned my sorrows in, and sunlight stabbed through my apartment blinds, like accusations. The caller ID showed Marcus my older brother, but his voice sounded nothing like the confident hotel executive I knew. "What did you do?" he whispered, and I could hear genuine terror beneath his words. "Dad just saw the news. He's going ballistic throwing furniture around his office." "What the hell did you do?" I stumbled to my feet still wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes. "Marcus, slow down. What are you talking about? I haven't done anything except drink myself stupid in this apartment. Turn on Channel 7 now." My hands shook as I grabbed the remote. The morning news flickered to life, and anchor Patricia Williams was speaking with that serious tone reserved for major breaking stories. Behind her, a familiar logo made my blood freeze. Hartwell Hotel Group. Federal investigators have launched a comprehensive probe into the Hartwell Hotel Group for alleged tax evasion and financial irregularities, she announced. According to sources close to the investigation, anonymous whistleblower documents were submitted to the IRS and FBI last month detailing what appears to be systematic fraud spanning multiple years. The remote slipped from my fingers. Anonymous whistleblower documents. My mind raced back 6 months to when I discovered those irregularities in the family business. As a forensic accountant, I'd been reviewing some of our hotel properties' books as a favor to Dad, looking for ways to optimize our tax strategies. Instead, I'd found discrepancies that made my professional instincts scream warnings. Inflated renovation costs with no corresponding improvements. Phantom employees collecting paychecks. Shell companies billing for services never rendered. I'd compiled everything into a detailed report and brought it to Dad's attention, thinking I was helping protect the family business. That meeting hadn't gone well. "You're jealous?" Dad had said, his face red with anger. "You can't stand that your sister and cousin are running operations while you're stuck pushing papers for other people. This is you trying to sabotage what we've built." The accusation had stung because part of it felt true. I'd always wondered why Victoria got to run hotel operations straight out of college, while I was encouraged to work elsewhere, building my accounting expertise. Derek, our cousin, had been given a vice president title at 25, overseeing acquisitions. Meanwhile, I was the family outsider with a useful skill set, called in occasionally for financial advice, but never trusted with real responsibility. After that confrontation, things had gotten worse. Family dinners became awkward affairs, where conversation stopped when I entered rooms. Victoria would exchange meaningful looks with Derek whenever I spoke. Marcus tried to stay neutral, but I could sense him pulling away too. The situation, Mom had mentioned, wasn't about money or career jealousy. It was about me becoming the family troublemaker, the one who asked uncomfortable questions about business practices that everyone else seemed willing to overlook. Marcus was still breathing heavily on the phone. "Brenton, you need to get out of your apartment. Victoria thinks someone might have planted evidence to frame you." That stopped my spiraling thoughts cold. Frame me. Why would anyone frame me? Because you know where all the financial bodies are buried. You understand the numbers better than any of us. If someone wanted to make this stick, they'd need it to look like the accountant was behind it. I walked to my home office, a converted spare bedroom where I kept my work files and personal laptop. Everything looked normal at first glance, but something felt wrong. The papers on my desk were stacked too neatly. My filing cabinet drawer wasn't quite closed all the way. "Marcus, I think someone's been in my apartment." I opened my laptop and checked my recent activity logs. My blood chilled as I scrolled through file access records. Someone had been in my system 3 days ago copying every document related to my investigation into the family business. Files I'd never shared with anyone had been accessed and duplicated. "They took my research," I whispered. "Everything I found about the irregularities, all my analysis, all of it." "Who's they?" I thought about the conversation with Victoria and Derek that I'd overheard 2 weeks ago. They'd been discussing the Brenton problem in the hotel lobby, not realizing I was sitting in the restaurant area around the corner. Victoria had said something about handling things quietly, and Derek had mentioned knowing a locksmith who did discreet work. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. My own family had broken into my apartment, stolen my research files, and turned them into evidence against me. They'd framed me for the very crimes I'd tried to warn them about. "Marcus," I said slowly, "I think Victoria and Derek set me up. I think they've been planning this for months." "That's impossible. They wouldn't." "Wouldn't they think about it? I discover problems with the books, I bring them to Dad, and suddenly, I'm the family pariah. They needed someone to blame, and who better than the forensic accountant who already looked suspicious for asking too many questions?" My phone buzzed with another call. Unknown number, but something about it felt official. "Marcus, I have to go. Someone else is calling." "Don't hang up, Brenton. Whatever you do, don't admit to anything. Get a lawyer. Get the best lawyer you can afford." But I was already answering the other line. "Mr. Hartwell, this is Special Agent Sarah Chen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak with you immediately regarding your family's business operations. We're on our way to your apartment now." The line went dead. Through my window, I could see 2 black SUVs pulling up to my building. My hands trembled as I realized the full scope of what was happening. Someone in my family had turned me into a federal suspect using my own research as evidence of my guilt. They'd isolated me socially, making sure I'd be alone and defenseless when this moment came. The knock on my door was firm and professional. 3 sharp raps that seemed to echo with the weight of federal authority. As I walked toward the door, I understood something that should have been obvious months ago. My family hadn't excluded me from the business because they thought I was incompetent or jealous. They'd excluded me because they knew I was good at my job. And in a business built on financial crimes, having an honest forensic accountant in the family was a liability they couldn't afford. Special Agent Sarah Chen was smaller than I'd expected, but her presence filled my apartment with unmistakable authority. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd solved countless financial crimes, her sharp eyes cataloging every detail of my living space. Behind her, Agent Rodriguez positioned himself near the door, while Agent Thompson began examining my home office setup. "Mr. Hartwell, we appreciate your cooperation," Chen said, settling into my kitchen chair with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "What I'm about to share with you might come as a shock." I sat across from her, my mouth dry as sandpaper. "I'm listening." She opened the folder and spread photographs across my kitchen table. Bank statements, wire transfer records, and architectural plans for hotels I recognized. But there were other documents too, pages covered in numbers and accounts that made my forensic training kick into high gear. "Your family's hotel business isn't just evading taxes," she began. "For the past 8 years, the Hartwell Hotel Group has been operating as a sophisticated money laundering operation for Eastern European criminal organizations." The words hit me like a physical blow. Money laundering. Not just creative accounting or aggressive tax strategies, but actual criminal enterprise. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was studying the documents spread before me. The patterns were there, hidden in plain sight. "Wait, these renovation costs?" "Exactly. Your hotels have been billing for construction projects that never happened, paying contractors who don't exist, and running money through dozens of shell companies." Chen pointed to a wire transfer record. This payment of $250,000 was supposedly for marble flooring in the Detroit location. But when our agents visited the property, they found the floors are original 1919s carpet. My mind raced through every financial document I'd reviewed for the family business. The inflated costs, the mysterious contractors, the shell companies I'd assumed were legitimate business entities. It hadn't been sloppy bookkeeping or aggressive tax strategies. It had been a machine designed to wash dirty money clean. The sophisticated part Agent Rodriguez added from his position by the door is that your family mixed legitimate hotel revenue with criminal proceeds. Makes it incredibly difficult to trace. Someone with serious financial expertise designed this system. Chen pulled out another set of documents, and my blood turned to ice water. Digital copies of forms bearing my electronic signature approving expenditures I'd never seen before. My name was on dozens of fraudulent transactions spanning 3 years. These approvals were made using your financial credentials, Chen explained. Your digital signature, your employee identification number, even your personal access codes. I never signed any of these, I said, but I could hear how weak my protest sounded. Someone's been forging my authorization. We believe you, Chen said, and relief flooded through me until she continued. But the criminal organization that hired your family specifically requested an operation supervised by a licensed forensic accountant. Your credentials gave their money laundering legitimacy. The full picture crystallized with sickening clarity. My family hadn't just excluded me from their business to hide their crimes. They'd been using my professional reputation and certifications to make their money laundering look legitimate to their criminal clients. The man your father has been meeting with, Agent Thompson, said producing surveillance photos, is Alexei Volkov. He runs money for several Eastern European criminal syndicates. Drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms dealing. Very bad people who needed a very clean way to legitimize their profits. I stared at the photographs of Dad shaking hands with a man in expensive suits. The meetings appeared to be taking place in hotel restaurants and conference rooms. Professional business-like encounters that could easily be mistaken for legitimate client meetings. How long have you known? I asked. We've been investigating the Volkov organization for 2 years, Chen explained. The financial trail led us to your family's hotels about 8 months ago. But the operation was so sophisticated, we needed someone with inside knowledge to help us understand exactly how it worked. 8 months ago. That was when I'd first started noticing the irregularities that led to my research report. The same research that had driven a wedge between me and my family. Agent Chen, I need to tell you something, I said, and proceeded to explain everything. My discovery of the financial irregularities, my report to Dad, the family's reaction, and my growing suspicion that they'd stolen my research files to frame me. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in her folder. When I finished, she exchanged looks with her colleagues. Mr. Hartwell, what you're describing aligns perfectly with our investigation, she said. But there's something else you need to know. She pulled out a final set of documents and my world tilted sideways. Financial records showing regular payments from hotel accounts to individuals I recognized. My ex-fiancée Emma had received $50,000 2 years ago, 1 week before she'd suddenly broken our engagement. My college girlfriend Megan had been paid $30,000 during junior year right before she cheated on me and shattered my heart. Your family has been systematically sabotaging your personal life, Chen explained gently. They wanted you isolated and emotionally dependent on their approval. Makes you less likely to ask difficult questions about business practices. The payments went beyond romantic relationships. My rejections from business school, the job opportunities that had mysteriously evaporated, the social connections that had inexplicably cooled. All of it could be traced to quiet interventions by my family. They've been manipulating my entire adult life, I whispered. The strategy is actually quite sophisticated, Agent Rodriguez added. Keep the forensic accountant close enough to legitimize the operation, but broken down enough that he won't challenge the family hierarchy. Chen leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Brenton, we need your help. Your expertise in forensic accounting combined with your inside knowledge of the hotel operations could help us trace every dollar that's been laundered through your family's business. You want me to help you build a case against my own family? We want you to help us stop a criminal enterprise that's been using your name and reputation to facilitate serious crimes, she corrected. And we want to clear your name in the process. I thought about the phone call from Marcus that morning, the panic in his voice, the assumption that I was responsible for the federal investigation. My family had spent years positioning me as the potential fall guy for their crimes, using my credentials to legitimize their operation while simultaneously destroying my credibility through personal sabotage. If I help you, what happens to them? That depends on the scope of their involvement and their willingness to cooperate, Chen said diplomatically. But Brenton, you need to understand something. Based on our investigation, your family was planning to blame everything on you. We found evidence that they've been preparing documents to claim you masterminded the entire money laundering scheme. The betrayal was complete. Not only had they stolen my research and used my credentials for criminal purposes, they'd been preparing to throw me under the bus when the investigation inevitably came to light. What do you need me to do? Chen smiled for the first time since entering my apartment. We need you to go home, Mr. Hartwell, back to your family, and we need you to help them incriminate themselves. She produced a small device from her pocket, no bigger than a button. But first, we're going to wire you for sound. 3 days later, I sat in Agent Chen's field office, surrounded by financial documents that painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive it took my breath away. She'd spent the morning walking me through 8 years of meticulous manipulation, and each revelation hit harder than the last. We've reconstructed your family's strategy, she explained, pointing to a timeline spread across the conference table. Every major setback in your personal life corresponds with a payment from hotel accounts to someone in your social circle. The timeline was devastating in its precision. Emma's payoff came exactly 7 days before she tearfully explained that we wanted different things and returned her engagement ring. Megan's payment preceded her affair by less than 2 weeks. My graduate school rejections had been preceded by payments to consulting fees for firms that specialized in academic influence. Your family didn't just want to control your professional life, Agent Rodriguez added. They wanted you emotionally broken and socially isolated. Someone who's desperate for family acceptance doesn't ask hard questions about family business. I studied the payment to Emma's account, $50,000 transferred from a shell company called Midwest Hospitality Services. The memo line read, "Consultant services rendered," but the timing made the truth undeniable. Emma's married to Derek now, I said quietly. My cousin. They used that $50,000 as a down payment on their house. Chen nodded sympathetically. The payment came with specific instructions. She was supposed to end the engagement in a way that would leave you questioning your self-worth, not suspecting outside interference. She did a good job, I admitted, remembering how Emma had made it seem like my career focus and family obligations were incompatible with her dreams for our future. She'd been so convincing that I'd spent 2 years wondering if I was capable of maintaining a healthy relationship. The Harvard Business School situation was even more elaborate. Agent Thompson said, producing correspondence between my family and an educational consulting firm. They paid $75,000 to ensure your application would be flagged for potential character concerns during the review process. That rejection had destroyed my confidence in my academic abilities and forced me to attend a less prestigious program, which had indirectly led to my current career path as an independent forensic accountant rather than joining a major firm. Every major decision in your adult life has been influenced by your family's interference, Chen concluded. They've been playing a long game positioning you as someone who appears successful enough to lend credibility to their business, but isolated and insecure enough to be controlled. The manipulation went deeper than romantic relationships and career sabotage. They'd influenced friendships, social connections, even my living situation. The apartment I'd thought I'd found through my own research had actually been steered to me through a real estate agent on the family payroll, ensuring I'd live somewhere they could easily monitor and access. The psychological profile is textbook, Agent Rodriguez explained. Create dependency through isolation, maintain control through conditional approval, and ensure loyalty through engineered gratitude. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Family meeting tonight at the estate, 8 p.m., don't be late. Chen read the message over my shoulder. Perfect timing, are you ready for this? I looked at the wire device smaller than a watch battery, but capable of recording everything that would happen during tonight's meeting. Chen had explained that my family was likely panicking, trying to coordinate their response to the federal investigation and finalize their plan to make me their scapegoat. They're going to try to get you to confess, Agent Thompson warned. They'll probably offer you a deal promise to take care of your legal fees if you admit to orchestrating the money laundering scheme. But you have evidence that I'm innocent. We do, but they don't know that. As far as your family understands, the federal investigation is based on the documents they stole from your apartment. They think you're the obvious suspect, and they're probably confident they can manipulate you into taking responsibility. Chen handed me a folder containing my own research from 6 months ago, the same research that had been stolen from my apartment and turned into evidence against me. There's something else you need to know, she said. We've been monitoring your family's communication since the investigation began. Your sister Victoria has been in regular contact with a criminal defense attorney, but not for her own protection. What do you mean? She's been planning your legal strategy, working with a lawyer who specializes in plea negotiations, preparing to help you get the best possible deal when you inevitably confess to the crimes they've set you up for. The depth of their preparation was staggering. They hadn't just framed me for their crimes. They'd been preparing to manage my punishment, ensuring I'd be grateful for their assistance even as they threw me to the wolves. There's one more thing, Chen said, producing a recording device. We intercepted a conference call between your family members yesterday. You need to hear this. She pressed play, and Victoria's voice filled the room. Alright. The Brenton situation needs to be resolved quickly, she was saying. Once he confesses, we can present this as the actions of a troubled family member who went rogue. Dad's already prepared a statement expressing shock and disappointment. Derek's voice joined the conversation. Emma's worried he might figure out about the payment. If he starts connecting dots, he won't, Victoria interrupted. He's been isolated for 2 years. He doesn't have the emotional support system to think clearly about this. He'll accept whatever explanation we give him. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice uncertain. Are we sure this is the right approach? Maybe we should just come clean about everything. Absolutely not, Dad's voice boomed through the speakers. Brenton created this situation by interfering in business matters that were none of his concern. He can take responsibility for the consequences. The recording ended, leaving the conference room in silence. They recorded that conversation 3 days ago, Chen explained. 12 hours before your brother called you in a panic about the news report. Marcus had known. He'd been part of their planning session discussing how to manipulate me into confessing to their crimes. His panicked phone call hadn't been genuine concern. It had been the opening move in their manipulation strategy. I need to ask you something, I said to Chen. When this is over, when you have all the evidence you need, what happens to me? Do I just go back to my normal life like nothing happened? Chen considered the question carefully. Brenton, your normal life was built on lies and manipulation. When this is over, you'll have the opportunity to build something real for the first time in your adult life. She was right. The career setbacks, the failed relationships, the social isolation, even the family dynamics that had shaped my self-perception for years. All of it had been artificially constructed to serve my family's criminal enterprise. Tonight, when you walk into that estate, Agent Rodriguez said, You're not just helping us gather evidence against criminals. You're taking the first step toward becoming free of their control. I clipped the recording device to my shirt, tested the audio levels, and prepared to face my family. For the first time in years, I would be walking into their presence with the power dynamic completely reversed. They thought they were meeting with their victim. Instead, they'd be confessing their crimes to their prosecutor. The Hartwell family estate looked exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, but tonight, the imposing colonial architecture felt more like a courthouse than a home. I parked my car next to Derek's BMW and Victoria's Mercedes, noting that Marcus's truck was conspicuously absent. The recording device felt weightless against my chest, but its presence transformed everything about this familiar environment. Gerald Thompson, the family attorney, answered the door. His usual polished demeanor seemed strained, and sweat glistened on his forehead despite the January cold. "Brenton, thank goodness you're here," he said, guiding me toward Dad's study. "This situation requires immediate attention, and we need your complete cooperation to resolve it properly." The study door opened to reveal my family arranged like a tribunal. Dad sat behind his mahogany desk, the same one where I'd presented my financial research 6 months ago. Victoria occupied the leather chair to his right, her expression cold and calculating. Derek stood by the fireplace, trying to project confidence, but failing to hide his nervousness. "Sit down, son," Dad said, gesturing to the single chair positioned in front of his desk, like a defendant's seat. Thompson opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document. "Brenton, we've prepared a statement that explains your role in the current federal investigation. It's important that we present a unified response to these allegations." I took the document, but didn't look at it immediately. Instead, I studied their faces, noting the tension and barely concealed panic beneath their composed facades. "Before we discuss any statements, Victor," I said carefully, "I need to understand exactly what the federal agents found. What evidence are they claiming connects our family to criminal activity?" Victoria leaned forward, her voice honey smooth with false concern. "The investigators seem to believe that someone with forensic accounting expertise has been manipulating hotel financial records to facilitate money laundering. Obviously, that points to you." "Obviously," I repeated, "because I'm the only one in the family with financial training." "Exactly," Derek added quickly. "And we know you've been struggling financially working as an independent contractor instead of joining a major firm. The temptation to supplement your income through the hotel accounts would be understandable." Thompson cleared his throat. "The statement we've prepared acknowledges that you used your access to hotel financial systems to create fraudulent transactions. It explains that you were acting independently, without the knowledge or approval of other family members." I finally looked down at the document. It was a confession meticulously crafted to take full responsibility for 8 years of money laundering operations. The narrative painted me as a bitter, financially desperate family member who had abused his accounting expertise and insider access to steal from the family business. "This is very generous," Dad said, his voice gentle with false sympathy. "We could have thrown you to the wolves, let you face federal charges without any support. Instead, we're offering you the best possible outcome." "What kind of outcome?" Thompson adjusted his glasses. "With proper legal representation, a full confession, and evidence of cooperation with federal investigators, we can probably negotiate a reduced sentence. 3 to 5 years served at a minimum security facility. We'll ensure you have excellent legal counsel throughout the process." Victoria added, "And when you're released, there will be a position waiting for you in the family business. We take care of our own, even when mistakes are made." The audacity was breathtaking. They were offering to take care of me after I served prison time for their crimes, as if their willingness to hire me after my incarceration demonstrated exceptional family loyalty. 3 to 5 years, I repeated, for money laundering operations that span 8 years and involve millions of dollars. "The financial scope makes confession essential," Thompson explained. If you force prosecutors to prove these charges at trial, they'll seek maximum sentences, 20 years or more. But a guilty plea shows remorse and acceptance of responsibility. Derek stepped away from the fireplace, his expression earnest with manufactured concern. Brenton, we know this is difficult. But you created this situation when you started interfering in business operations that were beyond your authority. Beyond my authority, I said quietly. You mean when I discovered the irregularities and tried to warn Dad about potential legal problems? You mean when you tried to sabotage legitimate business operations because you were jealous of Victoria and Derek's success? Dad corrected sharply. Your so-called concerns were actually attempts to undermine the family business. Thompson produced a pen and placed it next to the confession document. The federal agents will return tomorrow morning with arrest warrants. If you sign this statement tonight, we can present it to prosecutors immediately and begin negotiating your plea agreement. I picked up the pen, feeling its weight as my family watched with anticipation. The recording device captured every word as they incriminated themselves further with each passing moment. There's something I need to tell you first, I said, setting the pen down. Agent Chen and her team have been very thorough in their investigation. Victoria's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? I mean, they know about Alexei Volkov. They have surveillance footage of Dad's meetings with him. They know about the shell companies, the phantom employees, the inflated contractor costs. They know everything. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad's face went pale, while Derek moved closer to Victoria's chair as if seeking protection. They also know about the payments to Emma. I continued watching Derek's face crumble. $50,000 transferred 1 week before she broke our engagement. They know about Megan's payment in college. They know about Harvard Business School. You're bluffing, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Thompson, I said, turning to the family attorney, did you really think federal investigators would build a case based solely on stolen documents from my apartment? Did you honestly believe they'd pursue money laundering charges without thoroughly investigating the actual money trail? Thompson's briefcase slipped from his hands, spilling papers across the floor. The federal agents have been monitoring this family for 8 months, I explained. They know about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. They know about the contractor kickbacks and the fake renovation projects. They have recordings of phone conversations with criminal associates. Dad's face had turned from pale to ashen gray. How do you know all this? Because I've been working with them for weeks, I said, standing up and pulling the recording device from my shirt. Every word you've spoken tonight has been transmitted directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria stared at the device in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. Derek actually took a step backward, bumping into the wall behind him. You see, I continued, Agent Chen had a theory about tonight's meeting. She suspected you would try to manipulate me into confessing to your crimes. She wanted to give you the opportunity to prove her right. Thompson had gone completely white. As an attorney, he understood the legal implications better than anyone else in the room. The confession you prepared, I said, holding up the document, constitutes conspiracy to obstruct justice and suborn perjury. The payments to Emma and Megan represent wire fraud and witness tampering. Your meetings with Volkov constitute racketeering under federal organized crime statutes. Brenton, Dad said desperately, you're our son. You can't do this to your family. You're right, I agreed. I can't do this to my family, but I can do it to criminals who happen to share my last name. Through the study windows, I could see vehicle headlights approaching up the estate's long driveway, several sets of headlights moving in convoy formation. Agent Chen should be arriving any moment with arrest warrants, I explained. She wanted to give you the chance to incriminate yourselves completely before placing you under federal custody. Victoria lunged toward me, her composure finally cracking. You ungrateful little worm, We gave you everything. We protected you. You isolated me, manipulated me, and tried to frame me for your crimes. I corrected. But you made one critical mistake. What mistake? Derek whispered. You assumed I was the same broken, insecure person you'd spent years creating, I said. You didn't realize that discovering your betrayal had freed me from needing your approval. The front door of the estate burst open and Agent Chen's voice echoed through the hallway. Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have warrants for the arrest of Samuel Hartwell, Victoria Hartwell, Derek Hartwell, and Gerald Thompson. I walked toward the study door, then turned back for one final look at my family. By the way, I said, Marcus sends his regards. He's been working with the FBI even longer than I have. As federal agents flooded into the room, I stepped outside into the January air and breathed freely for the first time in years. The estate grounds swarmed with federal agents, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they executed search warrants throughout the property. I stood on the front steps watching my family being read their rights and loaded into separate vehicles for transport to federal detention facilities. The scene felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. Brenton? I turned to see Marcus approaching from the tree line, having apparently been watching the arrest from a concealed position. His face was a mixture of relief and profound sadness as he stopped beside me on the steps. How long have you known? I asked. About the money laundering 6 months. About your involvement with the FBI 3 weeks. He sat down heavily on the stone steps, suddenly looking much older than his 32 years. I should have told you sooner, but Chen insisted we needed to coordinate our approaches carefully. You've been working with Agent Chen? Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone to show me a series of encrypted messages. I discovered Volkov visiting Dad's private office at the downtown hotel last summer. I was supposed to be in Seattle that week for a conference, but my flight got canceled. When I showed up at the office unexpectedly, Dad was meeting with this guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a gangster movie. What did you do? Initially, nothing. I convinced myself it was probably just an eccentric client or potential investor. But then I started paying attention to things that hadn't bothered me before. The contractors who never seemed to actually show up for renovation projects. The shell companies that billed enormous fees for vague consulting services. The employees on payroll who I'd never actually met. Agent Chen approached us, having supervised the initial arrests. She looked exhausted but satisfied. Marcus has been invaluable to this investigation, she said, sitting down beside us. His access to hotel operations and family communications gave us insights we never could have obtained through external surveillance alone. I felt like I was losing my mind for months, Marcus admitted, watching our family become more and more corrupt while feeling powerless to stop it. When Chen's team approached me, I thought I was going to prison too. Instead, you helped us understand the full scope of the operation, Chen explained. Marcus provided documentation of cash deliveries, recorded conversations with hotel employees who were being threatened into silence, and helped us trace the money laundering back to its origins. Marcus pulled out a small recording device of his own. I've been wearing a wire for 3 months, Brenton. Every family dinner, every business meeting, every casual conversation about hotel operations. I captured over 40 hours of incriminating evidence. Why didn't you tell me? Because we knew they were planning to frame you, Chen answered. If Marcus had warned you too early, your behavior might have changed in ways that would have made the family suspicious. We needed them to proceed with their plan to manipulate you into confessing. Marcus looked directly at me, his eyes filled with regret. The hardest part was watching them destroy your personal relationships and knowing I couldn't warn you. When I found out about the payments to Emma and Megan, I wanted to tell you everything. You knew about Emma. I overheard Victoria bragging to Derek about how effectively they'd eliminated your romantic distractions. She was proud of how convincingly Emma had performed her role. Marcus's voice was bitter with anger. Victoria actually said that breaking your engagement was the best $50,000 the family had ever spent. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It was one thing to learn about the payment through FBI financial records, but hearing that Victoria had celebrated destroying my relationship made the betrayal feel fresh and raw. "There's more," Marcus continued reluctantly. "They were planning to frame you for grandfather's death, too." "What?" Chen opened her folder and withdrew medical records. "Your family was prepared to claim that you manipulated your grandfather's medication during his final illness, either causing or hastening his death for financial gain. The accusation was so monstrous it left me speechless. Our grandfather had died of natural causes after a long battle with heart disease. He'd been under hospice care surrounded by family when he passed peacefully in his sleep. Victoria had been saving his medication bottles," Marcus explained. "She was going to claim you'd tampered with his prescriptions to cause a fatal drug interaction. The narrative would have been that you killed him to prevent him from discovering your money laundering scheme. But grandfather died 3 years ago before any of this started." "Actually," Chen said gently, "the money laundering operation began during your grandfather's lifetime. He was the one who initiated contact with Volkov's organization." The revelation shattered my understanding of family history. The grandfather I'd admired as a successful businessman and family patriarch had actually been the architect of a criminal enterprise. "He confessed to me on his deathbed," Marcus said quietly. "Told me the whole story about how he'd gotten involved with Eastern European crime families, how the money laundering had started as a way to save the hotel business during the financial crisis. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because he made me promise to make things right someday. I thought he meant legitimize the business operations, get us out of criminal activities. I didn't realize he meant expose the entire enterprise. Agent Chen showed us photographs of documents recovered from the estate, bank records, wire transfer authorizations, and correspondence between family members detailing their criminal activities. Working together, you and Marcus helped us recover over $18 million in laundered money," she explained. "That's money that can now be returned to victims of the criminal organizations your family was serving." A black SUV pulled up the estate driveway and Agent Rodriguez stepped out with a familiar figure. Emma emerged from the passenger seat, her face pale and frightened as she approached our group. "I need to speak with Brenton," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma's been cooperating with our investigation," Chen explained. She provided crucial testimony about the family's manipulation tactics and confirmed the details of her payment arrangement. Emma sat down on the steps below us, unable to meet my eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "When Victoria first approached me, she made it sound like I'd be helping you avoid a destructive relationship that would hold back your career. How did she make destroying our engagement sound helpful? She said you were becoming too attached, that marriage would distract you from family business responsibilities. She presented it as protecting your future prospects." Emma finally looked up at me. I was young and scared, and Victoria could be very convincing. Marcus added, "Victoria's been recording all of her manipulation conversations with people like Emma and Megan. She kept detailed files on everyone she'd paid off, including their psychological profiles, and suggested approaches for maintaining their silence. Where are those files now?" Chen smiled grimly. "Federal evidence storage. Victoria thought she was protecting herself by documenting her criminal activities. Instead, she created a comprehensive record of witness tampering and fraud that will ensure substantial prison sentences." Emma stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Brenton, I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want you to know that ending our engagement was the worst decision I've ever made. Not because of the guilt, but because I was genuinely happy with you. Are you still married to Derek?" "I filed for divorce yesterday," she said. "Learning about the money laundering, seeing how they manipulated both of us, I realized I couldn't stay married to someone who was part of this conspiracy." Agent Rodriguez approached our group. "Chen, we need to move to the field office for debriefing. We've got 3 federal judges standing by to approve additional search warrants based on tonight's recordings." As we prepared to leave the estate, I took one last look at the building where I'd spent so many childhood holidays and family celebrations. Everything I'd believed about my family legacy had been a lie, but for the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. "Marcus," I said as we walked toward the FBI vehicles, "when this is over, when they're all in prison, what are you going to do?" "I was hoping you might want to start a legitimate business together," he said. "Something that actually helps people instead of stealing from them." "Like what?" "Forensic accounting services for other crime victims. Help people who've been swindled or defrauded, recover their money, and find justice." As Agent Chen's SUV pulled away from the estate, I realized that tonight hadn't just been about exposing my family's crimes. It had been about discovering that real family relationships were based on truth and mutual respect, not shared secrets and criminal conspiracies. For the first time in my adult life, I had a brother I could trust and a future I could build on my own terms. 3 days after the arrests, I was drinking coffee in my apartment and reviewing federal evidence files when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Victoria's defense attorney Cameron Mitchell was holding a press conference outside the federal courthouse. My blood chilled as I turned on the television. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mitchell announced from behind a podium bristling with microphones, "I'm here to share disturbing information about the government's star witness in the Hartwell money laundering case." Behind him, large poster boards displayed what appeared to be medical records and photographs, showing me stumbling outside various bars and restaurants. The images were clearly staged, but they looked convincingly authentic to viewers who didn't know better. "Brenton Hartwell has a documented history of mental illness and substance abuse," Mitchell continued. "These medical records show repeated treatments for bipolar disorder, anxiety, and alcohol dependency. The federal government is relying on testimony from someone whose own psychiatrist described as prone to paranoid delusions and compulsive lying." My phone rang immediately. Agent Chen's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Are you watching this circus?" "Unfortunately, yes. Those medical records are fake, right?" "Completely fabricated. But they're convincing enough to create reasonable doubt in potential jurors' minds. This is exactly what we expected them to try." On television, Mitchell was now displaying financial documents that allegedly showed my gambling debts and erratic spending patterns. He claimed I'd stolen money from family hotel accounts to pay off bookies and drug dealers. The Hartwell family trusted this troubled young man with access to their business finances, Mitchell declared. Instead of getting help for his addictions, he used his forensic accounting expertise to embezzle millions of dollars, then attempted to frame his own family when federal investigators closed in on his scheme. The press conference was professionally orchestrated, complete with sympathetic family members in the background. Derek stood beside Dad, both wearing expensive suits and expressions of wounded dignity. Victoria had been released on bail pending trial, and she positioned herself to look like a grieving sister concerned about her brother's welfare. Channel 7 is running the story as their lead item, Agent Rodriguez said, joining our conference call. "The narrative is gaining traction on social media. People love a good family betrayal story." I switched channels as and found coverage on every major network. The fabricated evidence was being presented as legitimate documentation, and several news outlets were already questioning the federal government's reliance on my testimony. "This is actually perfect," Agent Chen said, surprising me. "Your family just made a catastrophic legal mistake." "How is this perfect? They're destroying my credibility." "They're violating the conditions of their bail by discussing the case publicly," she explained. "Every statement they make can be used against them at trial, and their accusations contain lies that contradict their earlier recorded confessions." Agent Thompson joined the call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Mitchell's press conference includes claims that directly contradict testimony his clients provided during their arrests. He's essentially forcing them to commit perjury in public. On television, Derek was being interviewed by a sympathetic reporter. "Brenton threatened to destroy our family if I didn't break up with Emma." Derek claimed his voice heavy with false emotion. He said he'd rather see our hotels fail than watch me be happy. This federal investigation is his revenge fantasy made real. The problem with lies, Chen explained, is that they require coordination to be effective. Your family members are making contradictory statements because they can't communicate with each other while under federal monitoring. Victoria appeared on screen dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief as she spoke to reporters. My brother has always been jealous of our success, she said. When we refused to give him control over hotel operations, he became vindictive and started looking for ways to sabotage our business. Creating a fake money laundering scheme was his way of getting revenge. Wait, I said, studying Victoria's statement. She just claimed the money laundering was fake, but during our recorded conversation, she admitted to specific criminal activities. Exactly, Agent Thompson said with satisfaction. She's now committed to a defense strategy that contradicts her earlier confessions. Her own words will be used to convict her. The news coverage continued throughout the day, with family, friends, and business associates providing character witnesses for my relatives while questioning my mental stability and motives. The fabricated medical records were being treated as legitimate documentation by reporters who hadn't verified their authenticity. But by evening, the strategy began backfiring. Investigative journalists started fact-checking the family's claims and discovered inconsistencies in the fabricated evidence. The doctor whose name appeared on my fake psychiatric records had been dead for 5 years. The gambling debts allegedly owed to specific bookies were linked to businesses that didn't exist. Channel 9 just ran a segment debunking the medical records, Chen reported during our evening call. Their medical consultant confirmed that the documents contain medication names that weren't available during the dates they supposedly treated you. Plus, Agent Rodriguez added, the photographs of you allegedly intoxicated were taken at family events where dozens of witnesses can verify you weren't drinking alcohol. The coup de grace came when Emma contacted news outlets to contradict Derek's claims about our breakup. Her testimony about receiving payment to end our engagement directly refuted his story about my threats and jealousy. Victoria's lawyer is panicking, Agent Thompson reported. Mitchell tried to withdraw the medical records, claiming they were provided by unreliable sources, but it's too late. Every major network has experts analyzing them. By the end of the week, the family's counterattack had completely collapsed. Their bail was revoked due to public statements that violated court orders. The fake evidence they'd produced resulted in additional charges of fraud and perjury against all defendants. The defense attorney made a fundamental error, Chen explained during our final briefing. He assumed the federal case was weak enough that a character assassination campaign would create reasonable doubt. Instead, he gave us additional evidence of his client's criminal mindset. I watched the news coverage of my family being returned to federal custody this time without the possibility of bail. Their desperate attempt to destroy my reputation had instead demonstrated their willingness to commit new crimes while under federal investigation. What happens next? Plea negotiations, Agent Thompson said, but their bargaining position just became significantly weaker. The perjury charges carry mandatory minimum sentences that can't be reduced through cooperation agreements. And the fake medical records, the doctor who created them is also under investigation. Turns out he's been fabricating psychiatric evaluations for criminal defense attorneys for several years. As I turned off the television that night, I realized my family's final betrayal had been the most revealing of all. Faced with the consequences of their crimes, they'd chosen to commit additional crimes, rather than accept responsibility for their actions. Their counterattack hadn't just failed, it had proven that they were exactly the kind of people who belonged in federal prison. 6 months later, I sat in the gallery of Federal District Court as Judge Catherine Morrison delivered the final sentences in United States versus Hartwell. The courtroom was packed with journalists, federal agents, and victims of the money laundering operation. Agent Chen sat beside me, her presence a steadying reminder of how far we'd traveled from that panicked phone call on New Year's morning. Dad approached the podium first, wearing the orange jumpsuit that had become his daily uniform since his bail was revoked. Judge Morrison's voice was stern and unwavering as she addressed him. Samuel Hartwell, you orchestrated a criminal enterprise that lasted 8 years and facilitated the laundering of over $30 million in proceeds from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and arms dealing. Your actions enabled serious crimes that caused immeasurable harm to innocent victims. She sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Dad's shoulders sagged as federal marshals prepared to escort him back to detention. Victoria was next. Her expensive defense team had negotiated for months, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the fabricated medical records, the documented payments to people like Emma. Everything had combined to paint a picture of someone who was irredeemably corrupt. Victoria Hartwell. Judge Morrison continued, you not only participated in money laundering, but also engaged in systematic witness tampering, fraud, and perjury. Your attempts to manipulate the federal investigation demonstrate a complete disregard for the rule of law. 12 years in federal prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. Victoria turned to look at me as the sentence was announced, her expression filled with hatred rather than remorse. Derek received 8 years primarily because his cooperation had helped federal agents trace money to offshore accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. Even his assistance hadn't been enough to overcome the evidence of his direct involvement in the criminal conspiracy. Gerald Thompson, the family attorney, faced the judge last. His law license had already been permanently revoked by the State Bar Association. Mr. Thompson. Judge Morrison said, as an attorney, you had a special obligation to uphold the law. Instead, you became a central figure in facilitating criminal activities. Your conduct represents a profound betrayal of your professional duties. 5 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice, with permanent disbarment. Thompson had aged dramatically during the months of legal proceedings, his distinguished appearance replaced by the hollow look of someone who'd lost everything. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Agent Chen and me for a final press conference. The Hartwell money laundering operation was one of the most sophisticated schemes we've encountered, Chen explained to the assembled journalists. The perpetrators used legitimate business operations to disguise criminal activities, making detection extremely difficult. A reporter from Channel 7 raised her hand. Agent Chen, what role did Brenton Hartwell play in exposing this conspiracy? Mr. Hartwell's forensic expertise and intimate knowledge of hotel operations were essential to our investigation. His courage in cooperating with federal authorities, despite enormous personal cost, ensured that justice was served. Another journalist addressed me directly. Mr. Hartwell, how do you feel about your family members receiving such lengthy prison sentences? I considered the question carefully. I feel sad for the people they could have been, and satisfied that they're being held accountable for the people they chose to become. The victims of the crimes they enabled deserve justice. Do you have any regrets about cooperating with the FBI? My only regret is that it took so long to understand the truth about my family's activities. If I'd acted sooner, we might have prevented additional crimes. Agent Rodriguez approached our group with an update on asset recovery efforts. We've successfully seized and liquidated over $22 million in criminal proceeds. Those funds are being distributed to victims of the trafficking organizations that used Hartwell hotels to launder money. The financial impact extended beyond criminal restitution. The Hartwell Hotel Group had been sold to a legitimate hospitality company, with proceeds going toward victim compensation and federal prosecution costs. The estate where I'd spent childhood holidays was now owned by a non-profit organization that provided housing for trafficking survivors. What are your plans now? A reporter asked. My brother Marcus and I are starting a forensic accounting firm that specializes in helping fraud victims recover stolen assets, I explained. We want to use our expertise to help other families who've been victimized by financial crimes. Marcus had received complete immunity for his cooperation with federal authorities. His testimony had been crucial in establishing the timeline of criminal activities and identifying international co-conspirators. More importantly, our work together during the investigation had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor. Emma knocked on my apartment door on a rainy Thursday evening, looking nervous and uncertain. "I wanted to apologize one more time," she said, "and to thank you for not pursuing charges against me for the fraud." Agent Chen had explained that Emma's cooperation had been so complete and valuable that prosecutors decided not to charge her with accepting payment for fraudulent services. Her testimony about Victoria's manipulation tactics had been essential in securing convictions. "I also wanted you to know," Emma continued, "that my divorce from Derek is final. I've started therapy to understand how I allowed myself to be manipulated into hurting someone I cared about." "How are you doing?" "Better. Working with a nonprofit that helps women escape abusive relationships. Turns out my experience with manipulation makes me good at recognizing it in other situations." We talked for 2 hours, processing the events that had destroyed our relationship and shaped our subsequent lives. By the time she left, we'd both found a kind of closure that felt healthy rather than bitter. The federal government's whistleblower program awarded me over $2 million for my role in exposing the money laundering operation. The money provided financial security for the first time in my adult life. But more importantly, it represented recognition that standing up for truth had value beyond personal satisfaction. Marcus and I opened our forensic accounting firm 6 months after the sentencing. Our first client was an elderly woman whose son had stolen her retirement savings through fraudulent investment schemes. Using techniques we developed during the Hartwell investigation, we recovered 80% of her money and provided evidence that sent her son to state prison. "You know what's strange?" Marcus said one evening as we reviewed case files in our new office. "I feel closer to you now than I did during all those years when we were supposedly a happy family. That's because this is the first time our relationship has been based on honesty instead of shared secrets," I replied. Agent Chen visited our office regularly, referring cases where federal investigations had identified victims who needed help recovering stolen assets. She'd been promoted to supervise the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, partly based on her success with the Hartwell case. "The best part of this job," she told us during one visit, "is seeing victims get their lives back. What you two are doing here continues that process." A year after the sentencing, I received a letter from Dad in federal prison. He claimed to have found religion and wanted to apologize for misunderstandings about family business operations. The letter was clearly designed to manipulate me into supporting his appeals process. I showed the letter to Marcus, and we both laughed. "Some people never change," he observed, "and some people change completely." I replied, thinking about Emma's work with domestic violence victims and my own transformation from an isolated, manipulated family member into someone who could build genuine relationships. The most meaningful change came 18 months after the federal sentencing. I met Sarah, a social worker who specialized in helping children escape trafficking situations. She'd been following news coverage of the Hartwell case because some of her clients had been victimized by organizations that used our family's hotels for money laundering. "I wanted to thank you," she said when we first met at a victim services conference. "Your investigation helped us identify several children who were being trafficked through hotel networks. We've been able to rescue them and prosecute their traffickers. Our relationship developed slowly, built on shared values rather than convenience or manipulation. For the first time in my adult life, I was with someone who knew my complete history and chose to be with me anyway." 6 months later, Sarah and I were engaged. Marcus served as my best man at our wedding, a small ceremony attended by Agent Chen federal prosecutors who'd become friends and survivors of the trafficking operations that our investigation had helped shut down. During my wedding toast, I reflected on the journey from that devastating phone call on New Year's Day to building a life based on truth and service. 2 years ago, my family told me not to come to their celebration because I'd make everyone uncomfortable. I said, looking at the people who'd become my chosen family. Tonight, I'm surrounded by people who love me, not despite my flaws, but because of my willingness to face difficult truths. Agent Chen raised her glass. To the courage to do what's right even when it costs everything. War coat, and to discovering that everything you lose was never really yours to begin with, Marcus added. As I looked around the room at people who genuinely cared about my well-being, I realized the most important lesson from the entire experience. Real family isn't defined by blood or shared history, but by mutual respect, honesty, and the willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for each other's welfare. The last news about my biological family came 3 years after their sentencing. Victoria's appeal was denied by the Supreme Court, and she would serve her full sentence without possibility of early release. Dad's health was failing in prison, but his requests for compassionate release had been rejected due to his refusal to provide complete restitution to crime victims. Derek had become a model prisoner, earning his GED and working in the prison library. His letters to Marcus were genuinely remorseful, acknowledging the harm he'd caused and expressing hope that he could eventually make amends. "Do you think people can really change?" Marcus asked after sharing Derek's latest letter. "I think some people can," I replied. "But change requires accepting responsibility for harm you've caused, not just regretting the consequences you're facing." Our forensic accounting firm had grown to employ 12 people, including several former FBI agents who specialized in financial crimes investigation. We'd helped recover over $50 million for fraud victims and provided evidence that led to hundreds of criminal convictions. More importantly, we'd built something that honored the memory of what our family could have been while helping other families heal from similar betrayals. As I write this story, 5 years have passed since that devastating New Year's phone call. Sarah and I have a daughter named Hope, and Marcus is expecting his first child with his wife Jennifer. Our children will grow up knowing the truth about their family history, but they'll also grow up surrounded by people who choose love over loyalty, honesty over harmony. The greatest irony is that my family's attempt to exclude me from their celebration ultimately led to the most meaningful celebration of my life, the discovery that integrity, courage, and genuine relationships are worth more than any amount of money or social status. If there's a lesson in this story, it's that sometimes the most painful rejections are actually redirections towards something better than you could have imagined. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you knew was right? How did you find the courage to stand up for your values when it meant losing relationships that mattered to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family betrayal and share it with anyone who might be struggling with similar difficult choices. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps you find the strength to choose truth over comfort in your own life. Remember, the people who truly belong in your life will love you more for your honesty, not less. The ones who reject you for telling the truth were never really on your side to begin with.